My name's Patricia, Pat mostly, Fontenot before I was anything else. I'm 64 now, though the part of this that matters started when I was 60 and didn't have the sense the good Lord gave a goose about what was coming for me. I carried mail out of Lake Charles, Louisiana for the better part of 30 years, walked a route on the south side till my knees filed a complaint, then drove one till I retired. I knew every dog on that route by name and not half the people so well. That's a letter carrier for you, Chur. You learn a neighborhood the way water learns a low spot. The man moving that suitcase around my kitchen was my husband, Prassett. Everybody called him Dong, which I'm told means red on account of some sunburn he got as a boy that the name just stuck to. He came up out of a rice valley in the north of Thailand, a place I could not have found on a map with a gun to my head, and he'd spent near 20 years cooking in kitchens up and down I-10 before one of them put him in front of me. I was widowed young and had done my grieving and figured that was the whole story of me. Then here comes this quiet man with forearms like a butcher and the gentlest way of setting a plate down you ever saw, and we married at 55, both of us old enough to know what we had. For a while it was a good plain life. My pension and my Social Security, his cook's wages, a little house near the lake. Then the storm came, 2020. You maybe remember it on the news for a night and forgot it by breakfast. We lived in the after of it for years. Laura took the roof and half the walls, and every certainty I had about my own address. And what nobody tells you about a storm is that the storm is the easy part. It's the after the insurance man who won't call you back, the mold, the tarp that's your roof for 11 months, the premium, the doubles, and then doubles again till you're paying near $900 just to insure a house the water already ruined once. We were making it, but we were making it the way you make it across a creek on wet rocks. One slip and you're in it. And somewhere in all that Dane got quiet in a new way. He'd always been a quiet man, but this was different. I'd catch him out on the back step in the evening, what was left of the back step, just looking, not at anything. North and east out over the fence in the drowned yard at something that wasn't there. His mother mailed him letters, thin blue airmail envelopes with tie stamps so pretty I saved a few in a drawer, and he'd read them at the table and go still as I held breath. He couldn't read most of them to me, not really. The words didn't cross over. Then one night over red beans I'd stretched 3 ways. He set his spoon down and said it. Pat, I want to go home. I said, baby, this is home. We'll get the roof fixed. Give it time. He looked at me like I'd answered a question he hadn't asked. No, he said. Home. My home. And that was the whole of it. That was all the explanation I was going to get, that night or 100 nights after. I want to go home. I'd ask why now? Why leave a whole life? Why, when we'd finally near got the walls back up and he'd get a look on him like a man being asked to explain why water runs downhill, like it wasn't a reason, like it was just true. I'll be honest with you, because if I'm not honest, this whole thing's a waste of your time. It hurt me. 9 years married, and there was a room in that man I couldn't get into. I thought, is it me? Is it the country? Is it the storm? Is it some old ache from a place I've never seen? A woman's mind, when it's tired and scared and living under a tarp, will find the ugliest door in the house and knock on it. I knocked on all of them, but I loved him. And I was so bone tired of fighting Louisiana, the water, the heat, the insurance man, the whole slow argument of it, that when he pulled that blue suitcase out and packed it and set it by the door, I didn't fight that either. I let it sit. For near a year I let it sit, the both of us stepping around it, till the day the adjust. So I said yes, to a place I couldn't picture for a reason I did not understand, with a man I loved and didn't fully know. I said yes, and I want to tell you how that turned out, the heart of it and the whole of it, because I know some of you are standing in a kitchen right now, stepping around a suitcase of your own. Here is everything I knew about Thailand before I agreed to spend the rest of my life in it. Beaches, a cooking show I half watched, the word pad thai off a takeout menu. That is the entire sum of it, and I'm not proud. But I'd wager it's more than most folks know, and every bit of it was wrong for where we were going. Because Dang's home wasn't beaches. It was a rice valley up in the far north, a province called Nan, tucked against the mountains where Thailand runs out and Laos begins. And his people weren't even the Thai you'd think of. They were Thai Lu, an old hill people with their own dialect, their own weaving, their own slow way of holding on to things. I know all that now. Then I knew none of it. When he tried to tell me, the words got bigger than the both of us, and he'd just shake his head and say, "You'll see, you'll see." I had, in fact, already seen it once, and that's the part that scared me. 4 years back, when I was 60, we'd flown over so I could meet his people. And I want to tell you the truth about that trip, because it's the reason I near didn't go for good. It was the loneliest 3 weeks of my life. It's a long way to Nanchur. It is a long way to anywhere from Lake Charles, but Nan is the far side of a long way. A day and a half of airplanes to Bangkok, and Bangkok's not it. Bangkok's a hot, roaring giant of a city and still a whole country away from where we were headed. Then a little propeller flight north into the mountains, and then a truck, his cousin's truck, up switchback roads into a green so deep it looked wet, until we came to a village of wooden houses up on posts and a rice paddy that ran right up to the door. And there was his mother, 80-some years old, no bigger than a child, betel-nut smile, and she took my 2 hands in her 2 hands and said a river of words to me, and not one of them was English. Not one soul in that village had a word of English but Dong, and half the time even he wasn't speaking Thai. He'd slide into that old Thai Lu with his mother and his aunties, and I'd sit there in the middle of my own husband's family like a chair somebody left out in. The yard. They were kind. Lord, they were kind. But kind in a language, and I couldn't get across the water to any of it. I cried in a squat toilet in the dark so nobody'd hear me. 60 years old and homesick as a shipped-off child. So when he set that suitcase down for good, that's the memory I was walking back into. Eyes open, at least. The money, I'll say, was the one thing that made a lick of sense. We sat at the kitchen table. I'm a woman who likes a column of numbers, comes of 30 years counting other people's mail, and we ran it. The storm, for all its cruelty, had left us a strange gift. The final insurance settlement and the sale of the ruined lot came to about $120,000, more cash than either of us had ever seen in one place, and neither of us used to having it. Against that, my postal pension ran about $1,500 a month, and the Social Security I draw reduced for taking it early, like a fool in a hurry, but I wanted it in my own hand would come to a little over $1,400. Call it just under $3,000 a month steady till they put me in the ground. And in Nan, Dang laughed when I asked what we'd need. In the village we'd live in his family's house, the one his grandfather built, and you don't pay rent to your own grandfather. He figured the 2 of us could live decent, eat good, run the truck on around $38,000 baht a month. I made him write it in dollars for me. About $1,150 for the both of us. I checked his arithmetic twice. At about 33 baht to the dollar, it held. Just under 3,000 coming in, about 1150 going out. I sat and looked at that gap a long while. The visa I understood less, and I'll only tell you what's true, because rules change and I don't want to steer you wrong. Being married to a Thai man, I had a door open to me that a single retiree doesn't the money bar for a marriage visa runs lower, and you'll want to check the current numbers with a real office, not with me. But the plainer road most folks our age take is the retirement route, 50 and over. You either park 800,000 baht, around $24,000 in a Thai bank, or you show income of 65,000 baht a month, near $2,000, coming in from abroad. We had the cash to park and the income besides, so we were covered coming and going. There's a 90-day report you make, and an address paper they call the TM30, and a renewal every year for about 1,900 baht, and I'll get to all that bureaucracy directly because it earned its own chapter. We booked one-way tickets. I gave my niece the good dishes. I stood in that gutted little house one last morning, and I did not feel brave. I felt 61 years old and about to jump off something with my eyes shut, holding the hand of a man I loved and a mystery I still could not read. We landed into a wall of heat in Bangkok, and I thought, well, at least this I know. This is just Louisiana with better airports. Then we went north, and the country changed its mind about me. The little plane climbed up over mountains that went on like green waves, ridge behind ridge behind ridge, and set us down at a bitty airport in Nan Town, and his cousin was there with the same truck, and we drove up and up, out of the town, along a river the color of milky tea, past paddies stepped down the hillsides like something a patient giant had built by hand, and the air coming in the truck window got cooler and cooler until, and I know how this sounds, until I was cold, it was December. In the mountains of Nan, in December, at night, it gets down where a Louisiana woman needs a blanket and a second thought about everything she packed. I had brought sundresses. I want that on the record. I moved across the world and I packed for the beaches that were never there. The house was as I remembered it, and more so now that it was mine to live in. Teak gone silver with age, up on posts, a ladder stair to the sleeping floor, a kitchen that was really just a roof over a fire and a shelf, out back where the chickens ran. Dang's mother came down that ladder quick as a girl and took my 2 hands again, same as 4 years back, and said the same river of words, and this time, this is the thing, this time I understood that I was going to have to learn to swim in it or drown, because there was no plane home in 3 weeks. This was the water now. This was the whole ocean. Those first mornings undid me a little. I'd wake to roosters and to monks, real monks, barefoot in saffron in the gray light, walking the lane, while the village women knelt with pots of rice to give them, morning almsgiving, merit for the day, older than this country's name. Beautiful. And I stood at the top of my ladder stair in a borrowed sweater, watching a thing so beautiful and so entirely not mine that I felt like a ghost at somebody else's wedding. I could not do one single thing by myself, and for a woman who drove a mail route alone for 30 years, that was its own particular hell. I couldn't buy a tomato, couldn't ask where the toilet was, couldn't tell the sweet old auntie next door that yes, I slept fine, thank you. Dang was my mouth and my ears and my hands, and I could feel myself shrinking down into a thing that got led around, and I resented it, and then I was ashamed of resenting it, and that's a poison. That little circle. I want to be honest that it was there. But I'll tell you where the first crack of light came in, and it came in through the market and the money, of all things. Dying took me down to the market in Pua, that's a district town, 20 minutes off, and Lord, it woke me up. Great heaps of greens I couldn't name, chilies in every red there is, coils of a northern sausage called Sai-Yu-A, all lemongrass and herbs that they grill over coals till the smell of it just about lifts you off your feet. A paste called Nam Prik Noom you eat with steamed vegetables and sticky rice. And sticky rice cow niao is the bread of the north. You eat it with your fingers out of a little woven basket, and I took to it like I'd been eating it my whole life. And the price of it. I stood there while Dang filled 2 bags vegetables, the sausage, eggs, a chicken, chilies, a bundle of herbs, and it came to a couple hundred baht. $6-7, sure, for food that would feed us 2 days. I did the mail carrier thing, the thing I do. I started keeping the numbers in my head, a week of that, a month of that, and the gap I'd stared at on my kitchen table back home started to feel less like a number and more like air-like room to breathe, which I hadn't done in a while. There was no grab out where we were, none of that. No app to summon a car. You rode a motorbike, or you borrowed the truck, or you climbed in the back of a blue Songthieu, one of those little pickup trucks with 2 benches that run like a bus when they feel like it. There was no Walmart, no Target, no Sonic on the way home. There was a market and a temple and a river and a mountain and a whole lot of quiet, and me in the middle of it with about 40 words of nothing. That night I sat out under a sky with more stars than I'd seen since I was a girl, wrapped in a blanket in December in a country I'd have sworn was made of heat, and I felt 2 things at once, which is how the true things always come. I felt the money settle in me the sense that we were going to be all right, that the arithmetic was real, and I felt lonesome down to the floor of me, solvent and lost. That's a strange way to arrive at a life, but that's how I arrived at mine. Let me talk about the boring part, because the boring part is where a lot of folks' dreams die, and I don't want yours to die of paperwork. First, the good boring. We didn't pay rent, I've said that, but it bears repeating because it's the whole hinge of the money. Living in Dang's family's house meant our biggest cost back home. That killing insurance and mortgage weight just wasn't there. What we paid for was the living. I kept the book the way I keep everything. Electric and water and the gas bottle for cooking ran us maybe 3,000 baht a month, $90, and that was with a fan going and come hot season, 1 little air conditioner in the sleeping room. Food, to both of us, eating good and local, ran around 15,000 baht, a bit over $450. Petrol for the motorbike in the truck, the phone, the internet that came up the valley on a wire thinner than a promise, call it another 4,000 or 5,000 baht together. Then, the 2 I want you to actually hear because folks skip them and it's a lie to skip them. Health, we set aside real money for 8,000 baht a month, about $240, into a jar for doctor visits and medicine, and someday the insurance that gets dearer every year you age. And then a jar for what I call the belonging money merit at the temple, a gift when there's a funeral or a new baby, our share when the festivals come. 6,000 baht, near $180. That one's not optional out here. You don't buy your way in, but you carry your share, or you're not really living in the village, you're just parked in it. Add it up, and it's around 38,000 baht, that $1,150 Dang promised me at the kitchen table. He was right to the dollar, the show-off, against just under 3,000 coming in. That left us near $1,800 a month to the good. I want to be careful here, because I've heard the people who say you'll live like a king in Thailand on $500, and that is a flat lie, and it'll get some sweet trust and soul in real trouble. We were not living like royalty. We were living plain and good and rural and cheap in a house we didn't pay for, in one of the least expensive corners of the whole country, and it still took over 1,000 a month to do it right. But we banked that 1,800, and after years of wet rocks, banking anything felt like a miracle. Now the bad boring. The visa. Being married to Dang, like I said, gave me an easier road on the money side than a single person gets, but easier doesn't mean no road. There's a run into the immigration office, And out where we were, the office was a good drive off, and there's a 90-day report you make so the government knows you haven't wandered off. And there's the TM30, the paper that says which house you're sleeping in. And if you leave the country, you'd best get a re-entry permit before you go, or your visa dies at the airport while you're standing on it. A mistake I watched a British fellow make, and the look on him, I won't forget it. Every year there's a renewal, about 1,900 baht and a stack of copies of everything you've ever owned. I did what I did for 30 years at the post office. I made a folder. I made copies. I got there early. I was polite to the woman behind the glass. It is not hard. It is just relentless, and it never entirely ends. And anybody tells you Thailand's a paradise with no paperwork has never sat in that plastic chair. The one thing I'll say plain on health care, because it's the thing that ought to worry you, and does worry me, out in rural Nan, you are a long way from the big medicine. Little stuff the clinic in town handles fine and cheap. I've walked in with a chest thing and walked out seen to and medicated for $40, $50 at the most. No appointment, no fight. But the serious business, the surgeries, the cancers, that's a 6-hour drive over the mountains to Chiang Mai or a flight to Bangkok. You plan your life around that distance, or the distance plans it for you. And I'll tell you the other hard truth of my particular case. I'm about to turn 65. Medicare comes for me back home, like it does for everybody at 65, not a day sooner, and it will not cover me one single inch outside the United States. So there's a decision coming whether I keep paying in a couple hundred a month just to hold a door open to American hospitals I'd have to fly to anyhow. I don't have it fully settled. I'm telling you that on purpose, because the folks who pretend they've got every answer are the ones you shouldn't listen to. So, we were legal, we were solvent, the book balanced. By every number I'd ever trusted, we had done it, we had landed. And I sat with all that arithmetic squared away and felt the same thing I'd felt under the stars, that the money was never my problem. My problem was that I still didn't understand why we were here. And the money can't fix that. There's no line item for it. The smoke is what near broke me. I hadn't figured on the smoke. Come February, the whole north of Thailand goes up. The farmers burn the fields and the hills. The haze settles down into the valleys and just sits. And for weeks the mountains I'd fallen for went gray and gone. The sun a dirty orange coin, and I coughed, and my eyes ran, and you couldn't so much as see the paddy from the porch some mornings. They call it burning season, and it comes every year, February to April, and nobody had told me, and I took it personal the way you take everything personal when you're already low. And I was low, I'll say it. Dang, back on his own ground had bloomed he was up before light. Out with his cousins, deep in his mother's care, gone into that old dialect and that old life like a hand back into a glove it was cut for. And I was glad for him, and I lost him at the same time. He belonged so completely, and I belonged not at all, and the gap between us in that village felt wider than the ocean I'd crossed to get there. I had no friend I could talk to, no English for 100 miles. Just the smoke and the quiet, and a husband who was finally fully home in a place that had no room shaped like me. There was a supper that near did me in. His whole family crowded up on the sleeping floor around the low table, a dozen of them, sticky rice and curry, and that whole warm din of people who've known each other since birth. And they were sweet to me. Somebody kept my rice basket full. And Annie pressed the best of the fish on my plate, but the talk washed over me for 2 solid hours, and I sat in the middle of it with a smile pinned on like a Sunday hat, laughing a half-second late so they'd think I followed. You can be surrounded and starved at the very same table. I went down that ladder stair after and stood in the yard in the dark and thought, I have made a mistake I cannot undo. I have moved to the far side of the earth to be a smiling stranger in my own husband's house. There was a night, I'm not going to dress it up, there was a night in March, the house full of smoke smell, dying asleep, and I sat on the sleeping floor with my phone and I looked up flights. Lake Charles. I priced it out near $1,500 a ticket thumb over the button. I had a whole life planned in 90 seconds. My niece's spare room, my old church, a Sonic, people who knew my name. I sat there and cried the ugly way, the quiet heaving way so I wouldn't wake him, and I did not push the button, and I couldn't have told you why. Stubbornness, maybe. Or maybe just that I couldn't do that to him. But I want you to know how close the button was. The turn didn't come as a thunderclap. The true turns never do. That's the lie in every one of these stories but mine. It came in a doorway, a few mornings after, in the shape of an old woman and a loom. Her name was Cam. She lived 2 houses down, wide as she was tall. A laugh you could hear across the patty, and she was one of the weaving grandmothers, the Tai Lu women, who make that deep indigo cotton, dye it in clay pots out back with a mud that smells like the bottom of the world, and work it on wooden looms under the houses. I'd been walking past her loom for weeks, the way I walk past everything, a ghost. That morning she reached out and caught my wrist, not asking, telling. She sat me down on the bench in front of that loom and put the shuttle in my hand and closed her old fingers over mine and pushed, and the thread went through, and she cackled like I'd done something marvelous, which I had not. We had no words, not one that crossed. She talked the whole time that Tai Lu River, and I talked back in English and Cajun and Lord knows what, and none of it mattered because the loom was the language. Over, under, beat it down, over, under. Her hands teaching my hands. Hours of it, that day and the next and the one after, till my hands knew the thing my mouth couldn't ask about. And I learned my first real words there, not from a book, from calm naming things and me saying them back wrong till I said them right, Sawasdi. Kin cow you eaten yet, which is how these people say I love you, they ask if you've eaten. Arroy, delicious. Sip, sip song, the numbers. Com would hold up the indigo cloth we'd made and say a word and I'd say it back and she'd whoop. One afternoon she pointed at me and then at herself and then at the indigo pot and said a word, slow, twice, Penang, and Dang told me that evening what it meant, sisters. Not blood sisters, the other kind, the kind you make. Older sister and younger, and I was the younger. If you can feature that, 61 years old and somebody's little sister for the first time in my life. I about came apart on the sleeping floor when he told me. It was daft. A grown woman weeping over being called somebody's little sister by a woman she couldn't hardly talk to. I knew it was daft. It cracked me open anyhow. That was the first thread. After calm, there were others, the almsgiving in the morning, which I started rising for, kneeling in the lane with my own pot of rice, the monks passing, and one old monk who'd nod at me each day till the nod was a whole friendship. The market women who started saving me the good herbs, dying, watching all this from the side, saying nothing. But I caught him one evening just looking at me across the patty, and it wasn't the north and east look anymore. It was a look at something that was here, at me, here, and that was worth more than the button I didn't push. I understood it at the rice harvest, or maybe I'd been understanding it in pieces for months, and the harvest was just where all the pieces finally made the picture. Either way, that's where the room I couldn't get into all those years finally opened, and I want to tell it right. It was November, near a year in. When the rice comes ripe in that valley, the whole village bends to it at once. There's no hiring it out, no machine that fits those little step patties. It's hands, everybody's hands, one family's field, then the next. all down the line. And for the first time, I wasn't watching from the porch. I was down in it, bent over in the mud with a little curved blade, cutting rice beside Cam and the aunties and Dong's cousins, my back screaming, my hat sliding, the sun hot for once, the mud sucking at my feet, and somebody's transistor radio going. And at midday, the whole crowd of us sat right down on the bank of the paddy and ate sticky rice out of the baskets. Sai Yue off a fire, somebody built out of nothing. Nam Preek, a jar of something fierce passed around, and I was laughing at a joke I only half caught. Muddy to the elbow, one of a dozen women who'd worked a morning together, and I realized I hadn't thought about the button in months. And I looked over and there was Dong, down the row from his old mother, who was too frail to cut, but who'd come out anyway to sit on the bank and watch her family bring in her grandfather's field one more time. And Dang went and knelt by her in the mud and put a little sticky rice in her hand, and she patted his cheek, and neither of them said a word, and I got it. All at once and all the way down, I got it. He couldn't explain why he wanted to come home, because to him it was never a why, it was gravity. This was the ground his grandfather cleared and his father was buried in the edge of, and his mother would be. This was the paddy that fed 6 generations of them, and the little spirit house at the corner of the yard where the family's dead still get their morning rice and water. To be the son, the one son far off across an ocean, while his mother went small and his father's grave needed tending and the field needed his back that had been pulling on him every single day in that Louisiana kitchen, quiet and total like a tide only he could feel. It wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't even a choice. Not really. It was the deepest kind of belonging there is, the kind you're born owing, and he'd have had to be a different man to explain it, and if he'd been a different man, I wouldn't have married him. He couldn't say it in English. He couldn't hardly say it in Thai. But I read it clean off him, kneeling in that mud by his mother. Some things you can't hear till you've stood in the place they come from. There's a little spirit house at the corner of our yard, a small painted thing up on a post, like a birdhouse for the family's dead and for the spirits of the land. And every single morning of his life at home, before coffee, before anything, Dang carries out a bit of rice and a cup of water and a few flowers and sets them there and stands a minute with his hands together. I'd watched him do it back in Louisiana too, in a way. The north and east look off the broken back step that was the same prayer with no spirit house to say it at. Out here he finally had the post to pray at. One morning I started carrying the water out myself, and the first time I did it clumsy, not sure of the order of things, Dang didn't correct me and didn't make a fuss. He just stood beside me. And I understood that too, that he'd never needed me to believe what he believed. He'd only ever needed to be where he could tend it. He'd been trying to tell me that for years in the only language he had, which was to pack a suitcase and set it by the door and wait for me to be ready to follow. My own family came around slow, from their own far side of the water. My daughter, Renee, down in Texas, she'd been dead against the whole thing. Sure, her mama had lost her mind and run off to be a stranger. But we video call most Sundays, the connection permitting, and one Sunday I turned the phone around and walked her through the market, the Sai Yue Calm, the paddy, the monks in the lane. And she went quiet, and then she said, "Mama, you look like yourself. You haven't looked like yourself since Daddy. She's planning to bring my grandbaby out next cool season. I miss that boy like a tooth. That's the honest cost of this, and I'll come to it, but she gets it now, or she's getting it the way I got Dang, by looking at the place, and not just the leaving. The health care, since I promised you the truth of it, stayed the sharp edge. Dang's mother took a turn that winter, a bad spell with her heart, and we drove her down to Nan Hospital in the dark, the truck cold, Dang's hands tight on the wheel, and they steadied her. And then the word came she'd need the bigger hospital. The real cardiac people, and that's the 6 hours over the mountains to Chiang Mai. We made that drive. She's still with us, thank the good Lord, small and fierce as ever. But I sat in that Chiang Mai waiting room and understood the trade I'd made with my eyes open. I'd chosen a valley so far into the quiet that the quiet is also a distance from help. For the little things, the clinic in town is cheap and kind and quick. For the big things, you drive. You just drive. Anybody selling you rural Thailand as paradise is leaving out the road to Chiang Mai, and I won't leave it out. I'm 64 years old, and I'm sitting on the ladder stair of a teak house a man I love was born under in a valley in the far north of Thailand, and there is a length of indigo cotton drying on the line that I wove with my own 2 hands. It's crooked. Cam says it's crooked. She's right. I love it anyway. Let me tell you what a day is, because that's really all a life is, a stack of days. I'm up before light. I never used to be. But the monks make an early riser of you. I kneel in the lane with my pot of rice while they pass, and then I carry the water to the spirit house, and then Dong and I have our coffee, real coffee, grown right here on these hills. Nan grows a fine bean now, one of the few things that got easier while everything else got farther away. Some mornings I'm down at Com's loom by 8, working that crooked indigo, the 2 of us gossiping in our half-and-half tongue about whose son married who. Market in Pua when we need it, the blue songthail rattling us down and back. Afternoons Dang's in the field, or up seeing to his mother, and I've started teaching a little English to a knot of village children under the house on Wednesdays. I, who could barely order a tomato 2 years back, now I'm the English teacher, and if that's not the Lord having his joke, I don't know what is. Cool season brings Loy Krathong, and we float our little banana leaf boats with a candle and a coin down the Nan River in the dark. Thousands of small flames going downstream, and you push off the year's bad luck and your sorrows with it. The first year I floated mine and cried. Last year I floated it and just watched it go. Going on 3 years now since we came for good. I'd be lying to you if I called it paradise, and I've spent this whole time telling you I won't lie, so I won't start at the end. The smoke still comes every burning season, and I still hate it. My Thai is passable, and my Thai Lu is a joke the grandmothers enjoy. The healthcare distance still sits in the back of my mind like a stone, that 6-hour road to Chiang Mai for anything serious, and me about to turn 65 with a Medicare decision I still haven't fully made, knowing whatever I decide won't buy me a hospital bed within a day's drive of my own bed. I will never, not if I live to 100 here, be a Thai Lu woman. The dead in that little spirit house will never be my dead, and I feel that some days a pane of glass between me and the deepest room of this place, and I've made my peace that the glass is just there. I miss my grandbaby so bad it wakes me up. That's the true bill, and I'd hand it to you itemized, because the folks who won't show you the bill are selling you something. But here's the other column, and it's the heavier one. I wake to monks in the gray light, and I kneel in the lane with my rice, and the old monk nods at me, and I am not a ghost at that wedding anymore. I'm a guest they saved a seat for. I've got Calm, who is the truest friend I've had since I was a girl, and we can talk now, real talk, in a patched-together tongue that's half hers and half mine in all hours. I've got a husband who came all the way home and somewhere along the way made room for me in it, not by explaining. He never did learn to explain, but by turning around one evening across a paddy and seeing me there and being glad. We live on a plain good life for a little over $1,000 a month, and we sleep easy about money for the first time in either of our lives. And I understand him now. That's the thing I came for and didn't know I came for. I understand the pull that I once knocked on ugly doors over. It was never a room he was keeping me out of. It was a room he didn't have the words for, and I had to cross the world and learn a loom and bring in a harvest to finally stand inside it with him. If you're standing in your own kitchen, stepping around your own suitcase, of persons, of places, of griefs, I can't tell you your valleys out here. Maybe it's right where you are. But I can tell you the understanding is worth the crossing, even when the crossing is hard, even when you cry in the dark with your thumb over the button. Especially then. Before I let you go, one thing, and then I'll hush. If any little piece of this landed on you, if you've got some quiet pull of your own and you've started wondering whether the numbers could ever work for somebody like you, there's a free tool down in the description that's worth your few minutes. The Honest Thailand Retirement Starter Kit, it's called. I didn't make it, and I'm not selling you a blessed thing. It's just a straight-talking self-check that's every bit as willing to talk you out of this as into it, and a worksheet where you run your own real numbers, city by city, the way I ran mine at that wet kitchen table. Costs you nothing. And if it tells you to stay right where you're planted, well, sure, that's an honest answer too, and there's no shame in it. That's all I've got for you. Go on and take care of yourself now.